If zombies decompose, wouldn't you just have to wait it out until they turn into skeletons? What do you think? I remember the movie Jason and the Argonauts, and the heroes were having to battle against skeletons. So I think most people would be pretty annoyed at waiting it out to then find they still keep coming. Yes, but in most zombie movies you only see decomposed bodies rising up, not skeletons. Actors that play zombies are often reluctant to remove their skin and muscle for supporting roles. The answer to this question heavily depends on the type of zombies. If zombification is caused by a virus of sorts, then there would probably be no need to worry about skeletons. If the zombies, however, are reanimated by black magic or some other unknown entity that defies science and reality, then skeletons would definitely still be something to worry about after decomposition sets in completely, but definitely just one of many issues to address if this were the case. This is the best answer. People are forgetting that without soft tissues to hold it together, a skeleton is just a pile of bones. If the zombification was not created via necromancy / a curse, then the tendons, muscles, etc. would rot. Not to mention the nervous system, which would be required to allow communication between the various muscles moving said bones. The only reasonable way to achieve a walking skeleton at that point would be some kind of as of yet unknown fungus which created its own network of soft tissues and communication cells / pathways capable of generating coordinated movement of an approximately 23-pound pile of assorted parts. Frankly, at that point, you're not fighting a zombie anymore. You're fighting a fungus that's using a skeleton as a lattice on which to grow. And really, can we expect that fungus to maintain a semblance of the human body we've come to recognize as standard? In this situation, we are far more likely to see aberrations than human, or vaguely human forms. Skeletons are way worse. They utilize weapons and armor and have demonstrated rudimentary military tactics. Stabbing attacks are almost useless against them. The only upside is that they can't sneak up on you because of the xylophone music that always accompanies them. Spooky, scary skeletons. I think zombie fictions, vs non-fiction, LOL, normally don't address this or sneak in that bacteria and the decomposition process is interrupted by the zombie condition / virus / parasite, then normal body functions that pertain to ligaments or muscles are maintained by consumption of calories. When there is a lack of food, the zombies will revert to an inactive state, or hibernation, maybe similar to a snake bee / sea snake do no mentally hibernate. But, 28 days later, is a zombie flick built on the premise you just have to wait for them to decompose. Yeah, it's really good. On the other hand, The Walking Dead tells us that the decomposition is slowed down dramatically. Technically TWD should be over by now cause it's been 10 years, but anyways. The Walking Dead also tells us that people are out mowing lawns 8 years into the zombie apocalypse. Once people are settled down with food, water and shelter, the next thing is trying to get your mind and emotions under control. Doing something as simple as maintaining a lawn can be very relaxing and give you a sense of normalcy. But is a total waste of fuel or power. Unless they had one of those mechanical ones. My biggest problem with TWD is how unrealistic they made America seem as far as firearms go. It almost seemed hard to find guns and ammo, but in reality there would literally be guns and ammo everywhere, especially in Atlanta where Rick started, and a couple well-armed people could take down a decent-sized horde on their own. There's roughly 440 million guns in the US and 8.1 billion rounds of ammo were produced in 2018 alone. Without getting into politics of guns, I can say that I, as well as most people on the gun subs on Reddit, stock a minimum of 1k rounds per caliber we own and have at least enough guns to arm our families. They simultaneously underrepresented the total number of guns and overrepresented the number of full auto rifles. Like, I get that they could take select fire M4s from the bodies of soldiers, but where did all those full auto AKs come from? I think World War Z and the Zombie Survival Guide got around this by saying all organisms, including bacteria, avoid the selenium virus, so there is very limited decomposition. If anyone is a fan of zombies, or less common writing styles, then World War Z is the book to read. The movie is not a reflection of anything in the book, at all. That book was so good, not because of the zombies but because of the humans. The stories of survival and the hardships they had to endure in order to survive are what make the book. The audiobook is also very good. Since the book is written as a series of interviews, they got an amazing cast of voice actors to portray each interviewee. Nathan Fillion, Simon Pegg, Alfred Molina, Mark Hamill, Alan Alda, Paul Sorvino, Jerry Ryan, Renee Oberjanois, Henry Rollins, Carl Reiner, John Turturro, and the list just keeps going. I definitely recommend listening to it even if you've already read it. In 28 days it's infected, that die of starvation. There isn't any zombies. You are correct, but the movie story category, I feel, more accurately reflects the zombie theme, rather than a hyper-contagious infection. Yeah, you're right, but it's one of the rare they thought about it movies where it does make sense. I'd like to see the same concept done with a much longer incubation period. The fact that people turn right away actually gives people more of a fighting chance. But knowing that the people around you might be infected or contagious and not even know it, because there are no bites to show for it, is a much scarier concept. Really cranks up the paranoia, especially when we've come to realize how fucking stupid the general population can be about scientific concepts and quarantines. It could easily be a movie about how it took 3 or 4 months for society to crumble, and we even had a fighting chance of getting it under control. Yet we fucked it up because it was a slow boil and not enough people took it seriously. Imagine if everyone went about it the wrong way because they watched too many zombie movies and thought that it was simple. Don't get bit and shoot 'em in the head, they keep saying, when what they really need is to take antifungal medicine and not congregate. But the medicine ends up in short supply because everyone was in denial about what the disease actually was and they don't make enough. Everywhere there's violence and protests and arguments and political bullshit and paranoia and worldwide panic and eventually all-out warfare as people desperately try to cross borders with weapons, or start firing off missiles at other countries. By the end, the zombies are the least of anyone's worries. The movie ends with a small community of farmers quietly tilling a muddy field filled with mortar shells and debris. A fungal zombie wanders over. One of the farmers wearing hospital scrubs hits it with a shovel, downs a few pills and goes back to work. Camera pans out and you see barren cityscapes strewn with destruction and bomb craters. Everything is silent. Some birds chirping. But during the winter, wouldn't you just have to chop their heads off while they're frozen? Yes, but you've got to track them down, dig them up, and try not to suffer from exposure yourself. During an active zombie apocalypse it would be difficult to find the time to devote to anything other than staying alive during winter. If society is on the rebound, the winter purges have to be meticulously organized and tracked, you can't risk leaving even a single Z behind. So you need numbers, organized search patterns, supplies, etc. Yep, that was actually addressed in the book as well. Every spring thaw, there would be some zombies that would show back up. In the early winter, after the freeze settles in, they would send out zombie hunting parties to hunt down frozen zombies since they were much easier to kill then. Honestly, if you haven't read WWZ, check it out. It's a well thought out and well written zombie story. Well, set of stories, actually. Brooks addresses the lack of decomposition as well. Infected cells are toxic to everything, even bacteria. There is a chapter about military dogs having to be trained not to bite zombies because it would kill the dog if they ingested any of the flesh or fluids. Yeah, before technology, winter in Europe was one of the hardest things for human life, wasn't it? You'd be basically back to living in those times if it's an apocalypse. Why would you be back to those times? It's not as though humans have magically forgotten all of their past knowledge. What's to stop the creation of generators, solar panels, and wind turbines for electricity? Supply chain. To make solar panels you'd need a semiconductor clean room to grow large single crystal pieces of silicon. Someone has to mine and refine that silicon, transport it, produce electricity for all the various steps, get petroleum, and refine it to gas, etc. Modern tech requires millions of people working together to make it. In an apocalypse scenario, the chance that every step of these huge supply chains is still functioning is low. This is true, but it would be a slow slide, not overnight. A lot of our equipment would continue to function, diesel generators and the like, for many years to come, and libraries wouldn't vanish. Before I was a software engineer, I was an electrician, and give me access to a well-equipped tool shop, a ready supply of engines, and I could whip you up a piss poor but better than nothing generator. We'd end up with a weird mishmash, a base technology level somewhere around the late 19th/early 20th century, but with access to computers, etc. Many computers will run for decades if looked after like they were precious, and they would be, not to mention smartphones, which without a mobile network, are just an incredibly powerful lightweight computing device that can store huge quantities of knowledge. Like all the maps for the country you are in, the majority of the relevant parts of Wikipedia, etc. I also heard on a podcast one time that people never consider how many zombies would be lying in wait by accident. Sure, they may thin out during the winter, but all it took was one bite to start the apocalypse last time. All it might take is the springtime after. What if the outbreak is over and a kid walking in the woods stumbles over a barely alive zombie just uncovered in the snow? This could happen even years after if we account for snow slowing decomposition down, or whatever rules we decide on for the zombies. And every new zombie just prolongs how long we have to wait it out. Too bad there are billions of us. Edit: no, I haven't read World War Z and one don't particularly want to, but apparently this happens there. Also, zombies aren't real, so please stop replying telling me what would happen to the bodies. It's science fiction, guys. Didn't Max Brooks cover this idea in World War Z? It's been forever since I've read that book, so I can't remember for sure. I also have a vague memory of zombies being underwater along beaches and shores that would sometimes wander up and back towards society. You're correct on both accounts. The zombies in the snow one was an interviewee whose job was to go decapitate thawing zombies each spring. I think her story was also about her family's initial running away from the zombies and finding the new problem of food scarcity, unfair resource balance, etc. with other families that had similarly run north. Yup, CNN told people to go north to escape the zombies, so people drove north in RVs they just rented with no supplies, so there were huge refugee camps. Donner passing it in the Canadian wilds. Yeah, he covered the possibility of zombie resurgence in cold climates, and he created rules for why zombies didn't decompose quickly as well. World War Z is one of the most thought out zombie universes there is. Yes, it does. I think a chapter mentions patrols during spring to find frozen zombies. It also mentions a lot of underwater zombies that kill people who try to swim away. Yup, the long war of attrition that followed the primary Z war. The ZS that don't rot in the permafrost, the zombies that forever wave underwater waiting for a victim. And the waiting game of all the infected that fled underground, never to be seen again. I don't understand how a decomposing zombie could realistically survive being surrounded by the universal solvent. The water would quickly erode them away. And that's not to mention all the voracious scavengers that see no problem with rotten flesh as a main course. As others have said, you're correct. However, that's a problem on an individual or small group level. Part of the resolution of the book is that society has simply learned how to deal with zombies. Even a seemingly overwhelming number of the undead would be quickly and efficiently dispatched with the tools and strategies that have developed. A well-equipped group of 5 people can pretty trivially deal with 1,000 or more slow zombies. It would take a truly massive horde to threaten even a small town. Yup. Every town is fenced off from the wider world, every block, every street, and every home is a defensive stronghold. Everything is built around the inevitably of people getting infected, so the possibility of a large number of people getting infected is simply removed. As everyone is also equipped to dispatch zombies, whatever happens, things can't ever get really bad, until the threat is gone for so long that everyone forgets. Not sure. I have neither read nor seen World War Z, if they're even related, but one think that's an interesting thought too. Unless we know for certain the millions/billions of zombies are 100% gone, they will keep popping up in unexpected ways and spread the virus again. It's bound to happen perpetually until we find a vaccine. The movie and book are only tangentially related. The book is basically a series of interviews with military and scientific experts from around the world after the outbreak has been mostly contained. The book is so much better. It approaches the zombie situation like you were watching a documentary about it. And most of the really terrifying stuff came from how realistically bad and selfish people were, like the doctors selling fake treatments and smugglers trafficking people out of infected zones. It was scary because all that stuff is firmly grounded in real human behavior. The movie was a pretty basic zombie horror film with Brooks' title slapped on it. The human body doesn't freeze until it is near 0 Fahrenheit. Too much salt in our systems. Pretty significant parts of the globe never get that cold. My internet search history has gotten weirder since I started writing. But the zombies would experience frostbite and lose parts of their flesh due to decreased circulation, like with what happens with leprosy. The idea of that is they experience circulation. Obviously their bodies are rotting, so they do not have circulation, or they would die immediately. They are undead. Which means in most definitions, they are dead. The idea they require air, and thus oxygen and blood, is a misnomer. They are dead and their bodies are rotting. Obviously they experience a delay of decomposition. Something, possibly the something keeping their bodies moving, is keeping their bodies from natural decay. Most understanding of zombies is that they lack all functions of the brain except the brainstem, so something must be keeping that function alive. The rest of the body is dead. Most likely idea is that the disease would need to be some sort of parasite that would symbiotically keep the brainstem alive without the need for the rest of the body to exhibit living functions. It would also need to, in some way, slow decomposition. Though environment would play a role, most cold climates will actually prolong the zombies' lifespan as they are cool enough to kill bugs, but not so cold as to freeze the zombies in place. Exactly. But the parasite or whatever is keeping the brainstem alive and functional and delaying decay also needs to make muscles move. Our muscles are controlled by electrical impulses from our brain, which the parasite could in theory control from the brainstem/top of the spine. This would only work for a short period of time, however, since the muscles require blood flow to replenish oxygen and nutrients. That's why our heart rate and breathing increase when we exercise to get more blood and oxygen flowing to the muscles. Without respiration or circulation, the muscles would very quickly run out of energy and be unable to contract. So either the parasite has another method for supplying the muscles with energy, or there's some paranormal BS going on. A zombie can either be alive or dead. If it's the later, it has to be due to weird paranormal Bs, since life is required for movement, and an undead zombie wouldn't even be stopped by going skeletal. I fundamentally disagree. They would, because movement cannot happen without muscles. You can make elaborate pseudoscience explanations for why the zombie is dead but functioning. But you cannot explain movement of a skeleton. Now, I personally think it is far more problematic to explain a living zombie. Why do they die from only a headshot, or multiple bullets? Why do heart wounds never seem to work? Why do they not hemorrhage out when they are turned and thus solve the zombie problem all on its own? If they are decaying or have open wounds, and are alive, they would also suffer from all diseases a living human would experience. Sepsis, gangrene, hell, they could even contract illnesses like leprosy and tetanus. So it is far less engaging to consider living zombies. I do like The Last of Us myself, but there are a few holes there that bother me. Like, If the spores spread more effectively when a host dies in a dark, enclosed location, why are so many resources dedicated to making mobile zombies? Especially when they tend to stay in the location where they were turned. You don't ever see hunters leaving their locations, and by the time they reach the clicker stage, they lost their vision, and it makes sense for them to stay stationary. But all enemies we find are assumed to be turned in the location they were found. So, what's the purpose of that? Evolutionarily speaking. Thanks for watching. If you could like, subscribe and comment best Reddit stories for more Reddit videos.